All right, so really excited to be here today with my friend and also my client and also an attorney I do business with as well and refer a lot of people to, Eric Gros-Dubois, the founder of the EPDG law firm. And so I've got a lot of great questions for Eric, just talking about kind of the legal nature of what's going on right now. There's a lot of legislation, there's a lot of actions that are happening. And obviously we're really focused on business owners, but also the employees of those businesses as well. And so I'm just interested to hear what Eric's got in store, or what some of the biggest lessons coming out of this are for him. And before I get to any of that though, I just want to congratulate him, because right here in the midst of all this, he just hired 2 brand new associates. And so their first days at work are going to be very different than most other folks that have come on. But it is right to the point that I've been saying for the last few weeks. We have to keep moving forward. We have to keep things flowing. So great job on that. Why don't you tell me about that move before we get into anything else?
Sure. Thank you, Will. So let me say this. First of all, I have a very kind of, how do I put this? I'm not afraid of hiring people. And let me tell you why. Let's imagine you're hiring someone, a third-year attorney, and just say market rate is $85,000 a year. I'm not hiring someone for $85,000 a year. I'm hiring someone for, ready, wait for it, $7,800, $7,080 a month. Or every 2 weeks, I need to come up with $3,500. And if I can't have somebody work 80 hours in 2 weeks, right, 40 hours a week,
yeah,
and make me $3,500, then I got bigger problems. And so, the potential is that they're going to bring in $300,000 to $400,000 of revenue, but all I need to cover is 85. And like I said, it's not really 85; it's just 3,500 every 2 weeks. So that's my first attitude towards hiring. Second of all, this is the time to find bargains. I met a gentleman who quit his job, a perfectly fine, well-paying job, in February. And I said, why did you do that? And he goes, because I was looking for a better job. And I'm just like, and he's literally like, we can't even meet in person because they've quarantined society. So we're like doing a Zoom interview.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I'm thinking to my father telling me, never quit a job until you have another one. And boy, my dad was right. And so I asked the gentleman, so what do you want to get paid? And which, by the way, is a terrible thing that all interviewees should never answer, but they always do. They're negotiating against themselves. And he goes, well, I need to make at least this much. I called him a week later and I offered him 30% less. 30%. And look outside, like there's no cars on the roads.
Yeah.
And he's sitting at home unemployed. So he took it. So, I'm not trying to suggest that I'm profiteering off of the current situation. And I'd say it's rather the opposite. I'm anticipating actually a huge need for lawyers, not the opposite. So yeah. I want to be positioned so that when the swell comes, and I believe there'll be pent up demand, and I want to be in that position.
Absolutely. And I think it kind of goes to the point. There's a fine line between people doing what is necessary, people continuing to move forward, and then people profiteering and doing what's wise. Because I mean, to your point, you need to come up with $3,500 a week, but every 2 weeks, excuse me, every 2 weeks to be able to cover that guy's salary. But we also have to think about the revenue positions moving forward too, right? And so now's not the time. Definitely the hiring market is not what it was just 2 months ago. And it's very, very different, because 2 months ago, I was in the process of hiring salespeople for some of my clients. And I mean, it was taking forever. And those people got in at the absolute right moment, because it is definitely like overnight how fast those kind of things have changed. But still, kudos to you for even taking on folks right now.
So I'll tell you what's funny, Will. Somebody mentioned this to me. Now we are the old timers who are like, remember the recession in 2008?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I'm like, man, we are old. Like, we actually have like how many people who work for me have never experienced a recession? I came out of grad school in '07. So I was that guy getting that last job right before the crash. I got hired in October of '07, and the crash was March of '08.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so,
I'd started teaching a few years before that in the public school system, and the crash kind of happened, and that's what kind of jarred me into realizing how unsecure stuff. Because I took like a $12,000 pay cut in 1 year, just with limited stuff, and on teacher salary, that was pretty freaking significant.
Yeah.
And so, I actually started this business. I went out and on my own right there. And that was in the summer of 2010 is when I kind of started it and kind of transitioned out. And I ended up leaving the school system right at the beginning of 2011. And people thought I was absolutely nuts because we were still at the bottom of the recession, and it was tough times.
I feel like it bottomed out in 11, which means that, well, I mean, look on the bright side. You had nowhere to go but up.
Well, and that was the thing, right? And I say, and I've had some of these conversations, and maybe not like right now at this moment. Certainly, Governor DeSantis just locked us down for the next 30 days, a couple hours ago. But still, even today, though, like you may have an essential type of business. This may be the perfect time to start a business, because if you can start a business right now and you can just survive. If you can, not thrive, not, be long-term sustainable thing, but if you can just figure out some way to deliver value and survive right now, make enough money to cover your expenses, when things do turn around, you're going to be that much farther ahead. And, I think both of us, having gone through that last recession and kind of seeing what's there and building our business over the last 10 years, we're both in pretty secure positions right now. And I know I've been very blessed and humbled. I've talked about it on a couple other times that, I didn't get any calls from any of my clients saying like, all right, we've got to let go of your services. More so, I'm working more right now than I have at any other time in my life. And, been sleeping later and you're making all these adjustments. And so that comes from the experience and the fact that I started it last time. So I think anybody that's thinking about starting a business, like now is the perfect time to go at it. You've been furloughed, like you're doing things, you had that side hustle, you wanted to make the full-time thing, dump all your effort and all your energy into that while you can. If you're sitting on unemployment, like, that insurance covering your expenses, like get out there, figure it out, make the content, do whatever you need to do.
And think about this, you don't need to worry about office expense, right? You're starting and everyone's supposed to stay at home anyway. So start from your kitchen table, the proverbial, like starting in the garage. I'll say that I think it's actually incredibly shocking how blindsided and how quickly this happened now. And I'm sure that historians and economists will be looking at this for forever, right? For generations. And also, I'm disappointed in my reserves. I think that having gone through the last one, I should have been more ready. I should have been like more strict about having 3 to 6 months of capital. Yeah. My partner and I have been living the good times, right? And what's the old saying? Make hay while the sun is shining. Not only were we making hay, but we were eating it right up, And so.
Yeah, don't eat the seed corn. Don't eat the seed corn.
So also, I'll say this, part of why I feel like I've never worked harder than right now is we have to keep the existing clients happy and the existing employees happy. Like the camaraderie of my team, whether it's internal or external, like it's never been more sensitive and more valuable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Keep my team motivated and focused, which is, 3 weeks ago, I was really considering laying people off. And
I know we've had those conversations, about, where are we going? Where do we need to tighten the belt? Where do we need to focus?
Home, I asked her at 2 p.m, hey, how many times does the phone ring today? And her full-time job is answering the phone. And she said, it's rung like twice. And I'm like, yeah, you can go home. And she goes, when do you want me to come back? I'm like, I don't know. And after about 2 days, I felt really guilty. And I was like, you know what? If anybody actually needs a paycheck, it's probably her. Yeah. And it's really not fair. So I called her and said, listen, you need to come back and we'll find stuff for you. I don't care if she's like alphabetizing paper clips. I'm just going to keep her busy.
Well, one of the things that I've said, and I'll take this opportunity to say it to you as one of my clients as well, is that everybody right now, if they're slow, everybody can get involved in making some kind of content in terms of putting things out. Whether it's sharing things from their own Facebook page, whether it's helping to write something or edit something or do a video or something in terms of being able to promote the firm, being able to promote the business. Everybody can, there we go, taking notes. That's what we love. I've got other clients and their sales teams can't do exactly what they've done in the past, and I'm like, put them on the computers and they can get on social media. Like, you've got these lists of companies to reach out to. All right. You can call, but you can find all these businesses on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and you can start connecting with those people. Either it's just following them or sending a message in the DMs, whatever it is. You got to work on that, on the strategy on how things are happening. But I think a couple of key questions that I know, folks in all of our networks are going to be interested to find out about. Contracts, and then the CARES Act and PPP and all these other things when it comes from relief from the government, and then maybe just some of the other questions around operations and what's essential and what's not. Maybe we'll start there. I've had some clients try to make the argument that they're essential, but they haven't necessarily been officially designated, or it wasn't like very clear that they're essential. Like, what do you say about that? That it's somebody that's like, they're really trying to stay afloat or stay active or stay open in some way?
Well, I think the essential versus non-essential is, can you get out of your house? That's the definition, right? And so they're saying, if you can do your job from home, then you need to do your job from home. Now, all of this is fluid. The governor just changed something an hour and a half ago.
Yeah.
So I know that the answers I was giving people 3 weeks ago are different than they were 2 weeks ago, and so on and so forth. And I saw a police officer pull up behind me while I was driving down the road, and I'm like, am I breaking the law by driving to work? I don't know the answer to that. And I'm kind of have a cavalier attitude towards this pandemic. I think I might have had a mild flu like a month ago, so I probably already had it and we're good. So I don't know. And when you were talking about essential versus essential, I actually thought about it from a different aspect. I went through all of my fixed costs, and I was wondering which ones I could cancel, which goes to a very important thing. If you are a business owner, you need to actually know the contracts. So when I signed up with Comcast, I signed a contract, and in there it has termination provisions, notice provisions, probably mandatory arbitration if they want to get mad at me. If there's a bright side for small business owners, is there's going to be way too many problems for the courts to handle. Like, if every landlord sued every tenant that stopped paying their rent, there would just be an incredible backlog. And not only that, but many of the courts aren't even accepting service of process, or the process servers aren't even out there. So, if there's a silver lining, I'm like, listen, they can't even enforce the contracts if they wanted to right now. In a normal time, I would tell you, listen, you need to know the termination, the notice, and the dispute resolution provisions inside your vendor agreements. Famous story from in the olden days, back when there was like normal society, is a client wanted to cancel a contract, and they did what every normal person would do. They just called their sales rep and said, hey, I don't want to do this anymore. Then they got sued about 3 weeks later, and the reason was because they didn't follow the instructions for how to actually terminate the contract. And it was set forth. It was like, page 4, paragraph 5. And so I'm telling people, listen, you need to know your contracts. Most likely there's not any sort of relief. Like, people keep asking about force majeure clauses. Most likely force majeure clauses, I mean, listen, it's going to be...
Just explain for everybody, like, what's a force majeure clause?
It's supposed to mean act of God. right? Like I don't need to keep paying rent if there's World War III and Miami gets nuked or there's a hurricane, right? So, but is a pandemic where the governor shuts down the economy an act of God? I don't know. I mean, I'm sure people are going to have fun litigating that.
Yeah.
And it'll come down to the wording in those clauses. But the reality is most contracts actually don't have a force majeure clause. And so a lot of times you're just going to be stuck. And people are calling me. They're like, oh, can I stop paying these creditors because of this? And I'm like, well, let me see the contract, but probably not. Now, it's an excellent opportunity to pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, I'm going to have a hard time paying you, creditor, landlord, whoever.
Yeah.
Let's work something out. I want
some kind of forbearance or some kind of deferment or something like that.
My best friend owns a physical therapy business. They are closed. And he has like something crazy like 10,000 square feet of commercial class minus office space. And so he called his landlord and said, listen, here's my proposal. I'm going to pay you half. And as long as this lasts until we can get back to normal, I'm going to keep paying you half. And then however long that is, let's say it's 4 months, then I will pay you back that half that I didn't pay over the next 8 months after that. So like give me twice as long as I need as like a break to pay you back. The landlord told him no, as a matter of fact. And he just sent the landlord a little note on April 1st today and said, hey, landlord, I know you said no, but I'm going to do it anyways. And the landlord's in a position now where they can either continue accepting 50% with a promise, it's a promise to get paid the rest later on, or they can hire a lawyer and do what here in Florida we call a 3-day notice, which is an eviction of a commercial tenant.
Yeah.
Good luck having access to the courts. The courts are, for all intents and purposes, closed for stuff like that. So to your other question, these loans and these grants, it's changing every day. The information I had a week ago is not the same information I have now. It's very readily available. And in fact, I will share with you the thing that we posted yesterday that you can share with your people, Will.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's the most important thing to know. There will be things from the state of Florida, and then there'll be things from the federal government. The federal government are going to handle most of their stuff through banks. They're gonna go. So you are going to go to your bank and you're going to apply for loans that the bank is going to service, but they're going to be backed up by the federal government.
So very similar to any other kind of like SBA type loan.
Well, here's the difference. Last year, the SBA didn't quite do $30 billion with a B, B as in boy, in the whole year.
Right.
They're looking to do $300 billion in the next month.
Right.
So, I've reached out to all my bankers. I have 3, and each of them have told me the exact same thing. Like they're reading from the same playbook. Number one, we still haven't been given instructions by the federal government. This is we are now 4 days after the president signed. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We are 5 days since the president signed the law last Friday. So the SBA hasn't given instructions yet. They just came out with a preliminary application. It's probably not even what they're going to end up using. So once they get instructions, then the banks have to decide how they're going to process it. So then the banks have to like make up their own rules. So I'm being told on the most promising future, it's 2 weeks from now, the banks will start accepting applications. And then even then, they are going to prioritize their existing good customers. So if you don't have a relationship with a banker, and by the way, I've heard horror stories already from the big banks.
Oh my gosh.
Bank of America and Citibank, they have no idea what they're doing. I've heard good things about Chase. If you got Chase Business Banking, they're on top of their stuff. But this is really going to be led by community banks. So if you're an entrepreneur or a small business owner and you don't have a relationship with a community bank, I'm sorry. And I suggest that you make one in case this ever happens again.
Well, and that's a lot of the conversations we've been having. Like, obviously, in the middle of it, now is the time that we can all see all these wonderful things that we should have been doing for the last 10 years or things that we've talked about. Well, and you, I know you're a subscriber to the same belief in that philosophy that your network really is your net worth. And, a lot of how we're able to survive through this is going to rely on the relationships we have. So I I do feel bad for folks that have just maybe always looked for the cheapest option, or gone with these things because they saved 10 basis points somewhere else, or they built a business and they didn't want to go out and network at all, or it was solely built on advertising, and it was all these transactional models, because those businesses, they're not going to survive unless they pivot very hard to something else that somebody needs a transaction for. So like the last downturn, it was those cash for gold businesses, right? Those were popping up all over the place. Everybody came in, but those things were built not to have a any kind of recurring relationship, because nobody just went and sold like a little bit of gold. They were ready to do that. They sold all of it.
I learned from he's a client of mine, but I consider him a mentor. He believes that businesses are all about relationships. And the way he looks at it is he's the middleman between his suppliers, his employees, and his customers. And then you can add in other stakeholders, of course, his landlords, the professionals he works with, whatever. And so he would happily pay a little bit more to have a great relationship with that vendor or supplier, so that on that 1 month when he's having trouble, that guy has a relationship with him and is going to like extend the credit. And actually the true moral of the story is really sad. He brought on new partners, and the new partners didn't think of anybody as a relationship. They thought of everybody as an enemy. Your employees are trying to steal from you, your clients are trying to steal from you, and your vendors are trying to steal from you. So what they do, they obviously tried to squeeze everybody as hard as they could. And then when there's a problem, all of those people would turn their back on them because they have no love for them. There's no love there. It's
all transactional. And if there's no transaction, and that's, man, we stress that so much all the time, that the purpose of a business is not to make money. The purpose of a business is to add value to the marketplace, and we make money on the back end of that. And I know we've talked about that with your team. Like, the purpose of your firm is to solve people's legal problems, and if you do that well and you do it at a lower expense than they could do it for themselves, then you get to make a profit at the end of that. But everybody walks away happy. And if we take the focus off of the value and we just focus off the money, you can do a lot of shady stuff to make money and to continue doing it and say, oh, value is being produced. But those non-tangible things that I think we lose the focus on, because they're not easily, it's not an easy metric, right? I tend to think that we focus on the bottom line and profit just because that's easy to compare. And, and as guys, there's all kinds of jokes about, guys comparing things, and that tends to drive a lot. And we're all very competitive, and we keep score on so many things. Profit makes an easy scorecard, but the reality is there's a lot of intangible value out there in terms of the relationships, like you said, loyalty of your team, engagement of your employees, loyalty of your customers, the community as a whole, the brand that you have out there, and the willingness of people to come around and say, we want this business to survive versus we don't want this business to be here. And maybe that doesn't translate into bottom line for the shareholders, or as much as it could in the short term, but I would rather have a smaller short-term profitability for a sustainable and infinitely sustainable future than have a huge windfall for 1 quarter and do irreparable damage to the brand.
It sounds like you're trying to play the infinite game, my friends.
Indeed.
No, for Will.
I know that's a great book that we talked about and read at the beginning of the year.
It was your present for Christmas.
And yeah, I gave it to all my clients, and I think one of the things out of there, one of the fundamentals that he talks about is having that existential flexibility, and it gives all those great examples. And I think a lot of times we really love books, or the books resonate with us, that don't necessarily teach us something new. They maybe teach us a new way to crystallize or to communicate things that we already believe to be true, right? They bring a lot of different things together.
I learned some new things from that, because, okay, if you ask a business school graduate, what's the purpose of business? He's going to say to make a profit, right? But is it to make the most profit in the short period of time or to make a sustainable profit for the rest of your career, for example. Yeah. So, you know, my friend, the client, the mentor, his business partners might have made a lot of money those first couple quarters. It was just the first quarter they had things go sideways. Then now they're out of business. So
these aren't new ideas. I mean, Buckminster Fuller, I use that analogy of the bee, and I think I put that in training for your team and stuff, and you know, bees going to flowers and people and all that kind of stuff. I mean, he wrote about that stuff back in the 60s, and even in the 90s. Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I mean, that's one of the main stories he talks about is watering down the soup, and how people would line up at this restaurant for their world famous clam chowder. And, you know, eventually the owners got older and they sold out, and the new management came in, and the first thing that they did was they watered down the soup. And so for a few months, man, they were banking because they were still able to charge these ridiculous prices for the soup. But all of a sudden everybody realized, you know, this soup is not the same as it used to be, and they stopped coming. And now it didn't matter. Now they tried to go back and fix the soup, but the trust had already been broken. And so, you know, these folks have always been aware of this, and the ideas have been around. But, you know, I think, and even in the Infinite Gain, Sinek gives Milton Friedman a pretty bad rap, and you know, maybe it was. I think that idea of shareholder primacy, I think it's often taken out of context, right? And so you can attribute it back to there. But I mean, even Friedman recognized the need for certain public services and things like that, and was a huge proponent of the courts. And we can only have a free market if we have access to recourse and stuff like that. But there definitely has been this perversion of the concept of shareholder supremacy, and that the only purpose of the business is to deliver a profit back to the shareholders. And, you know, the interesting thing of that too is, like, even companies that are maybe, you know, Amazon being a key example, like they're not necessarily as highly regarded today as they have been in the past. But they grew on a model where, you know, I have a friend, you know, a mutual friend of both of ours that can't stand Amazon or refuses to invest in their stock because he says they're bad for shareholders. And that may be true, but, you know, Jeff Bezos dumped all the profits back into the money to continue making good product. So he believed in value to the customer as the supremacy. And now he's, you know, I know he battles back and forth between Apple and a couple of the other ones, but, you know, a couple of the biggest companies in the world, and at least publicly known, you know, the richest man in the world. And he did that by saying that shareholders were subservient to the customer value that could be created.
You know, I think the thing that all of those companies have in common is they have a very clear vision. And the vision isn't, let's make money for the shareholders. It's like you said, the money for the shareholders comes because you're serving the vision, and taking it out of the stratosphere and talking about small businesses. You know, could I have cut half my staff at the first sign of, you know, this pandemic? Sure. And what kind of loyalty would that get me from the ones that were left behind? You know, are they just going to come to work every day, metaphorically working from home, and be wondering if I'm going to fire them next?
Absolutely.
You know, and by the way, having been in that position once upon a time, guess what? I just sat there and worked on my resume and did the minimum to not get fired.
Yep. And that's the loyalty back to the business, right? And I've had these conversations with, you know, as I'm sure you've had as well, with other folks talking about everything from like the landlord conversations, you know, that landlord that said no, like what a moron right now, because, you know, people look at these things trying to get the numbers to work, but they have to realize that ultimately it is people and relationships that drive those numbers and are the foundations. So I had a friend I did a little video talking about it before, but her and her family own a lot of rental properties. They own some in like low income neighborhoods, normal all the way up, all over the place, right? And so she had some that was Section 8, so she's secure with that. But then she had others, and she's like, I got to have at least half of these people keep paying their rent, because she had just dumped a ton of money into replacing roofs, replacing ACs, and, you know, to your point earlier, she's like, my reserves aren't where they should be. And So I just kind of reached out to her off of her post, and we're just kind of chatting back and forth. I'm like, what about incentives? Like, can you put a TV in everybody's unit right now and say, if you stay, on time for the next 3 months, this TV is yours and you get to keep it, for as long as you want. Right. And, that's that might be a $600-700 investment, but if you're talking about $2,000 a month rent, that may do that. She's like, yeah, but we don't have the cash to do that because of all the capital outlay. It's like, all right, well, I don't know, some people, and I know our good friend Carlos Garrido, who we were just at his webinar a little bit earlier, was talking about now is not the time to discount, but in some cases, maybe now is the time to discount, because what I pointed out to her is you already expect people to start defaulting, and people aren't going to be paying their rent, and you need 50% to keep paying the rent, which is basically just saying that you need 50% of your current rent roll. But if you will go to everybody right now, and this is where the marketing kind of plays into it, right, and the communications aspect, and you went to all of your tenants and say, this is a tough time. We're going to do our best to keep all the services going, keep on top of everything. Here's a roll of toilet paper, or a pack of toilet paper for everybody, and we're cutting everybody's rent by 80% for the next 2 months. 80% of, and I said, if you did that, you think you could get 80% to keep paid. If 80% of the roll pays 80% of the rent, that's still 64% of the total roll. That's a lot better than 50%.
Yeah.
And even if it was 70%, then that's 56. So that's still even a bump. And to that intangible thing we were talking about, though, that's better for the numbers to do something like that. But then now everybody has at least a better impression of their landlord. Like, they're trying to do something. Yeah. And now they have that goodwill of their entire role.
I gotta tell you, so it's the first, we always do invoices on the first. As you're saying this, I just sent a message to my billing assistant, and I said, don't send invoices if you haven't yet, because I think it's the time where we need to be sensitive to our clients, and I want to change my message, because we use an automated system. I don't want it to just say, here's your invoice, pay me. I want it to say something sensitive to the fact that we're in coronavirus time. If you can't pay your invoice in full, please reach out to us and we'll work something out with you. This is that's the kind of thing that builds relationships, right? So, what can we do? And I think that's going to be a key thing. And, we still need to have the relationships with our attorneys, with our bankers, with everybody else. But, just remember the human aspect of it. I think that's what it's ultimately comes down to. And I mean, obviously, if everybody got along all the time and never any disagreements, you wouldn't have a need for attorneys, right? And that's always going to happen. But from where you sit, and, I know we were chatting before, and like, you're going to see a lot of litigation that comes out of this in one form or another. And just like in any kind of downturn, right? It's just going to be the same kind of things that happen on a normal basis, but just in a mass scale. But even beyond that, like, what do you see as some of the big changes in the business landscape? I mean, as a business owner yourself of a decent sized law firm, and all of your clients being businesses, like, how do you see them just fundamentally changing? I see the privacy of technology. This is like the thing that pushes us finally to fully embracing video conferencing, working from home, telecommuting. Which, by the way, I'm actually so old school. I put on a suit and a tie. I come to an office. I have like a traditional 4 walls and a desk. I like to do all my meetings in person, whether they're networking or sales or staff. I think a lot of things are gonna change. I think it's gonna be a boon for Silicon Valley. These delivery services, it's really interesting. And then I think there will be some backlash. I think there'll be nostalgia for old time things, like doing things the old way, like going to a restaurant.
Yeah. Well, our friend Wayne Eldred, we were talking about, I talked to him yesterday, and we were kind of talking about that. And, people are talking about, like, these are the times that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And that goes to mindset and a lot of things and how things do. But, you see that in different industries as well, because, kind of one of the things I took away from our conversation yesterday is that, the restaurant scene is probably going to drastically change. And you're going to see that gap between restaurants are either going to be just your very basic value, inexpensive options that are largely based off of delivery. And they like the small mom and pop retailers that ultimately turned into Amazon distributors, and Amazon is that distribution market, and they got rid of their brick and mortar. You're going to see restaurants kind of go to that and go to this takeout and delivery, and maybe they have a very small footprint somewhere to establish the brand, and in a warehouse, 5 miles away in the district where the rent is cheaper. And then the restaurants that still continue to make it are going to be those ones that are super high end. They're going to be really high priced, but they're going to deliver some kind of experience that you could not possibly get at your home or getting it from a takeout. And everything in between is going to go to the wayside.
I agree completely. So I'll tell you a little bit about my life. So Monday through Friday, I am in networking world, and I have an event after work almost every day of the week. And so for all intents and purposes, I don't cook, and I only eat out Monday through Friday. Then the weekends, I go home. I typically there isn't much networking on the weekends, so I'll be home and I'll cook, and I like to cook, so I'll get my home cooked meal. Well, now I've been home for almost 3 weeks. I have not, and I'll admit, I haven't done takeout once. I have cooked every single bite of food that has gone into my body for 3 weeks. I'm probably much healthier. I think I've lost some weight. But you know what I'm really missing and craving? Like a really good steakhouse with like a big bottle of wine, and I meant big, like bold, like something like that goes well with that T-bone or ribeye or whatever. Yeah. Things that, you can do it yourself, I guess, but that's what I miss.
There's something about having somebody bring it to you sizzling on a plate of butter and, corking that bottle of wine for you.
Yeah. I think when I can go out, that'll be the first place that I go.
I think it'll be the case for a lot of folks. So tell me kind of the last thing, maybe here before the top of the hour. And, you mentioned, like doing your networking meetings and we've had this conversation many times before about how that's basically how you built your firm and is such a vital part. And I've helped set up some of that automation and things for you to send out your emails and just stay on top of things as well with reminders. But now that we're all virtually, are you still trying to do your virtual coffees and being able to continue that networking in whatever fashion we can at the moment?
I am. It's much less satisfying, and also I look at networking as a pipeline and like a machine. And the meat that goes into the machine, like the thing that feeds it, is business cards from the networking events that I go to, right? Go to networking event, get cards, schedule coffees, have one-to-ones, send them handwritten thank you cards, and repeat. And so I'm running out of fuel for like the input, so I was teasing my partner that I'm actually gonna have to start doing some work if there's no more networking for me to do.
Well, and I think there are still some virtual things that are going on, and there's some ways to do it. I'll tell you, like, one of my other clients, Vanessa Vasquez, she's been doing her lunch and learns that she would do every couple of months live. She shifted to doing those virtually and doing those online.
You do one last week? I think Deirdre participated.
Yeah, Deirdre was there for a while, and one of the messages that I'm trying to put out there to organizations like the chamber. So next week, I'm doing one of the events online for the chamber as well. And rather than just just kind of a lecture or PowerPoint slide presentation or something like that, and more so than just a chat, like there's a lot of great functions in these technologies. Like in Zoom, I was showing the staff how we could do breakout rooms. So think about a chamber meeting where you would normally have, or a wind down Wednesday where we'd have some Corona. Cheers to you. But we do a good morning Coral Gables, you would go and we'd have announcements and everybody would be up, but then they would say table networking, right? And so you get to talk with just that group of 10 people. Well, we can do breakout rooms and you can still sit around and you can network with those 10 people and send a digital business card afterwards. And so I'm going to try and demonstrate that so that we can at least have some kind of semblance of how that can continue to work. Because otherwise, like you say, if the if the pipeline or like an analogy I like to use, if we're not planting seeds, there's not going to be any harvest on the back end of it.
Well, okay. So first of all, yes, please, can we do that? Because, for example, Carlos did the seminar today for the Chamber of Commerce, which normally would have been the Reconnect seminar, which is a lunch that's all about networking. And if you've ever been to one, it's 20, 30 minutes of networking before, then the actual event, everyone gets to introduce themselves, and there's a small presentation. And then afterwards, it's another 20, 30 minutes of people exchanging business cards and talking. So while I was there for Carlos's, I didn't meet anyone new.
Well, and I kind of felt a little weird about it. Like, what's the best way to go and do it? But I was seeing people that I didn't know, and I was kind of looking them up on LinkedIn in the middle of the presentation and reaching out. It's like, hey, let me follow you or follow back and see.
On the farming metaphor, certainly, if we don't plant any more seeds, we won't have any harvest. But I also like to think about my orchard, and my orchard needs to be tended. And right now, what's going to get us through this is going to be tending the trees that have already grown and borne fruit. So now's the time to be reaching out to people that have already referred you or have already done business with you. And obviously, we'll do as much of that as we can to hopefully get us through to when we can get back out there and start planting new seeds.
Yep. And I mean, it's going to be a mix, but I know we're going to have to wrap up here and move on, but I'll send you some of that information and we can share it back and forth and share it with our extended networks as well on some of these other events.
Well, here's a plug for your client. I just got her email. Vanessa's doing virtual business basics for lawyers running a successful law firm tomorrow at 12.
Yep.
Lunch and learn virtual. So I guess BYOB.
Yeah, it is. Bring your BYOB or lunch and anything else. But I started that with her last week, so she's going to do breakout rooms in the beginning.
Bring your own bag. It was like a bag lunch.
Bring your own bag. Oh, okay. There you go.
I'm not suggesting we all start drinking.
You can see where my mind is at. I'm all ready to.
Listen, tell her she can do it at 5 p.m. and then it's totally classy.
Well, there you go. Well, some of the things that we've even talked about in the past, like doing wine tastings with clients and stuff like that. You could still totally do that with some of your clients and like reach out to folks and say, because like you said, Total Wine is still delivering. Send a bottle of wine to every one of your client's house, or send 2 wines and, hey, we're going to compare these wines and share notes, and just still can have you can have a virtual dinner party basically over something. Our buddy Ricardo Trios is doing that with chocolate as well. Helped him come up with that idea. So
this is the time to be tending your existing crops and making sure they bear as much fruit as they can.
Absolutely. All right, my friend. Well, I appreciate the time and the consideration and all the advice. And if anybody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to get in contact if they have questions about their business, about moving forward, staying alive in these times and all the legal nature of it?
Eric at epgdlaw.com.
All right. Email you directly. And that's just the website as well, epgdlaw.com.
And thanks, Will, for everything you do. And by the way, I'm still optimistic. This is going to be a great year.
I think, and those of us that can keep our eyes open and can keep looking for the opportunities and shift where we need to shift. And you're a sailor as well. And one of my mentors last night was talking about being the trim tab. And there's going to be big shifts out there, and we don't need to try and shift everything that's going on. But if we're just that little trim tab that can get those big rudders to turn, then we'll still have those opportunities out there.
That's right. When you're sailing, you have your objective, right? And right now, we've all been sailing along with the wind, nice off our beam, and everything's been pleasant. Now we're in the middle of a storm, but guess what? We still got to get over there.
Yep. So going to be a lot of tacking back and forth, but just keep making forward progress. All right, sir. Be well, and I'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.